Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar. I'm Francis Sealey from GlobalNet 21 and Enfield Voices, and this is one of the many webinars we do, but it is different. It's different for two reasons. One, I'm not doing most of the interviewing, I'm doing very little of it. I'm handing over to three young people who are sixth formers in schools. They're members of the Enfield Youth Parliament, and they're also formed what we call EnCaf Youth, which is the youth section of the Enfield Climate Action Forum. And the other thing that is different is that we're interviewing an MP. And this is the first MP that I hope will interview of many in the future. And Kate Osamor has agreed to be the first one to try it out with us, which is really fantastic. So, thank you all for joining us. The three students are Monica Caruso, who you'll see in a minute, Anna Revidiego and Olivia Eken, and they'll introduce themselves as we go along. Anyhow, Kate, thank you very much for joining us today and taking part in this. And I know everyone, especially the sixth formers, appreciate it. What I'd like to ask you, and I ask this of everyone because I think people like to know this question, when did you first become aware that climate change was such an important issue that it was going to seriously affect us all, and that you felt you had to do something about it?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Francis, for inviting me. I'm your guinea pig for today, so please, everyone, be kind, be kind. But in response to your question, it's a very, very serious question. And I think one of the first things we all need to sort of take on board when we say, when did we first find out, or when did I become more aware of it? It was when I started listening to scientists. Scientists have been warning us for decades about the threat of climate change. But what worried me was that what was happening with government was that they weren't listening. So on one side, we've got the scientists, and this sounds quite similar to what's happening with COVID, actually. The scientists are telling us one thing, and the politicians or the government is not listening. So the first time I became more aware of what was happening was when I realized that scientists were worried and that governments across the globe were not listening. And we're seeing that with what's happened with Trump, his denial of climate action or climate crisis, and the withdrawal from the actual agreement itself. So the first time I became really aware of it was, as I said, was when scientists started talking about it and governments and politicians were ignoring it. And I think also it's the younger generation. They have made me really listen to what's happening, because it's their future that really is at stake. It's their planet that we're going to leave behind in a state if we don't listen to the scientists right now. So it's a combination of the young people who are fantastic critical mass, we've got the scientists, and then the deniers as well. So it's a combination of that.
Okay, so you said the scientists, yeah, but young people as well you listen to. Well, you've got three to listen to today. So yeah. I'm going to hand over to Olivia to start the interviewing of the three young people of you. So get ready.
Okay, thank you for joining us and agreeing to be interviewed. I think it's great that you're coming on here to listen to the voices of young people. I think that's amazing. So I thought it'd be nice if we could introduce ourselves. I'd go first. So my name is Olivia, and I'll tell you a bit why I became passionate in climate change. So I attended one of the climate youth strikes last year in April, and since then I've learned so much more about the climate crisis, and I've been motivated to do something about it every day. I see examples of the destruction that we have on our planet on a global scale, but also on a local scale. I can see the Edmonton incinerator from my bedroom, for example, and every day I just wake up and see it, and it just motivates me to do something about it, because there are things that are destroying people's lives, and nothing is being done about climate change, and no one's listening to young people's voices, and it's our future that's going to get destroyed. So that's one of the reasons I'm very passionate about climate change. I can hand it on to Anna now, who will explain a bit herself.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm an Enfield Youth Parliament member and an EnCaf member too. I've always been passionate about climate change, but everything started in year 7, where my school used to do so many projects like water explorers and things like that. And since then, I've always been very passionate about it. I've always spoken about it, told people like what they should do, for example, recycling and how important it was. And also, Monica and I used to be prefects in my old school, and we decided that we should do something about it because at the time, my school never used to recycle. So we did something called the Green Bishops Goes Green. So there were loads of green beans around the school, and every Friday we'd have to collect them and just unite the community to make sure that we would all recycle. And I feel that it's so important that young people know about this, and I know we can lead change, and I know that I can see it coming, but we just need everyone. That's why I'm so motivated to just tell more people.
Hello, my name is Monica and I'm an EnCaf member, and I, like Anna, have always been passionate about climate change, but I think I got really passionate about it when I realised that it affects nearly every aspect of our life, from our food sources to our transport to our energy to our ecosystem. It really does affect everything, and I think if we don't act now, the planet is going to become like catastrophic. And I think that if young people come together, we're the ones that can actually make a change. So that's why I'm in EnCaf as well, and that's why I'm just like really passionate that we need to make a change now, because this is the most important time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we've introduced ourselves, I think it would be nice to start the interviewing. I'll start with the first question. So the Conservatives have recently made the 10-point plan for the Green Industrial Revolution. What is the Labour Green New Deal proposing that the Conservative plan doesn't?
Well, one of the first things is the 10-point low carbon plan doesn't meet the scale of what's needed to tackle the unemployment emergency, the climate emergency we are facing. So it's too timid, it's too weak, it's not really recognising what the problem is. And what we need is a government to be brave and to bring the whole country together and to say, what do we need? How can we improve it? By just tinkering around the edges, that shows that they're not taking it seriously. So that's one of the first things I would say about it. And the opposite to that is we actually have targets, and our targets is that we have to aim for, carbon neutrality. We need to cut global emissions. Yes, there's dates and there's times, and we can talk about them all the time. But the bottom line is that we have to make sure that those of you like yourself can look to parties to be able to work out, okay, what are they saying? Because you're coming to an age where you're going to have to vote. And it's about you guys being able to vote for parties which are going to think of your best interests. And then how does that translate into a better society? So what I would say to you is look deeply at what is being said to you. Think about the emergency. And Monica put it right when she said there is emergency now, and it affects all sides of our life, our food, our health, our transport, our employment. And you're the future, and you soon will have, or maybe no, none of you can vote yet, but soon you'll be able to vote. And that is your job, is to make sure politicians are listening to what you need now, so that by the time you're of a few years older, you can say, okay, I was listened to, it was worth me voting. So that should be put into the plan. Not only what the plan is saying, is it any good for me? That's what I put across to you, Olivia.
Okay, I think that's really, really important. My next question is, one thing we noticed that was missing from Labour's Green New Deal was education about climate change. And do you think that young people and teachers are equipped well enough with information and knowledge about climate change?
Well, that is really, really important. I didn't know that, Anna. Thank you for bringing that to light. And that's something that needs to be taken back, because it's very, very easy for a group of people to talk about climate change, talk about what needs to be done. But then equally, you could be alienating a group of people who don't understand anything and think, what can I do? This doesn't affect me, because no one's being educated. A lot of the schools that I visit, I'm seeing firsthand how teachers are educating the younger generation, but then there's a conflict, because when they go home to mum and dad, They don't understand about recycling. They haven't got the time possibly to separate out different containers, wash them, you know, and get them ready for the recycle bin. And how do we make sure that we need to walk away from and change our course of action, so it's just not only one generation who's been educated. And that's what is happening, is I'm seeing that firsthand, that there is a generation coming up which understands, is educating each other, is being taught from a very young age. But then when they leave their kind of peer group, no one else understands. So the education of all of us is really important. Otherwise, there is going to be a backlash, and there will be a group of people who think it doesn't affect me, I'm of a certain age, it doesn't matter, and there's nothing I can do. And a lot of people say that to me. What can I do? There's nothing I can do. I can't change my habits. So it's really important, you know, and it's a great spot in your question, Anna, about education. That is key. That is really part of the problem, is a lot of people are not educated. So unfortunately, they continue damaging the environment and damage their immediate environment as well, which is something we do have control over.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay, so the Conservatives have pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050. Do you think that they are doing enough to reach this target, or do you think it's too late?
Well, they're not doing enough to reach the target. We have to think of the global south as well. We need to think of the, you know, people who are the least polluters, and they are the ones who are most affected. So actually, the ambition of 2030 or 2050 is not even quick enough for those who are being damaged now. There are so many communities who at this point in time are being pushed out of their homes because of global warming. So whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's floods, whether it's hurricanes, this is a reflection on what is happening globally, which means that we have lots and lots of people who've been pushed out of their homes. So we need to be responding to that as well. So we're not being ambitious enough. We're not including the globe. We're only looking at our own island. We're being isolationist in that respect and thinking about Europe, but actually we need to connect with what's happening in Asia, what's happening in Africa, what's happening in the Americas, because they are showing us the signs right now that global warming is affecting them. Yeah. And that's really something we need to think about, you know, when we're talking about the time span, 2030, 2050, we need to be a lot more ambitious. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, people are going to lose their livelihoods, lose their homes, and lose their lives as well.
I completely agree. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you, Monica. Great question.
Thank you.
I agree. I think we do need to be far more ambitious and really hurry to tackle the climate crisis. So having said that, do you think that Labour's doing enough in their Green New Deal to tackle the climate crisis?
Well, what Labour are doing is being ambitious, but if you're in opposition, let's just be honest, there's not a lot you can do. But what you can do is give hope, and you can guide, you know, companies who do have the power to make sure that they are delivering green jobs, they're investing in the future, and more importantly, they're thinking about when Labour is in power, how things may be different for them. So can we do more? It's difficult when you're not in power, but you can get the message out, because you can educate people to say, this is what we would like the world to look like. This is how we would support and protect animals or food standards. You know, and we can talk about Brexit, for example, post-Brexit, what will this country look like? What will the food standards be like? That's part of the Green Deal as well. You know, so there are points where we can inject what we would like and our standards, but overall it's a bit difficult because we're not in power. But that doesn't mean that we're defeatists, not at all. Like I say, there's opportunities. So for instance, Caroline Lucas, which I'm sure you all know, she has a private members bill on climate and ecology emergency bill. And that's going to be read next year, 2021. And, you know, she's really ambitious. She's been really, really ambitious in it, you know, but a lot of it is saying there is a climate emergency. And she's basically saying we need to protect and conserve our nature reserves. And, you know, we need to look at our overseas supply chain as well, which links into the clothing that we wear, the way that people are treated, you know, and the way that we have this consumable fashion that sometimes we forget that there is someone at the end of that who's making, you know, an item for us and we're just disposing of it. So how do we fit into all of that? How do we make sure that it works and that we're not abusing people? And also within that private members bill, what Caroline is saying is she's saying that there should be citizens' assemblies where people come together and they have their say of how we should be going forward. And I think that's something which a lot of private members bills don't have. We're more talking to the government, whereas she's talking to the government, she's talking internationally, and she's also talking to our immediate communities as well. So that's quite exciting. Good.
That's really, really good. The next question is, we've seen how climate change affects the global south. Do you think that countries like the UK are doing enough to reduce their emissions?
No, unfortunately they're not. I mean, I'm sure you saw today that the Conservative Party have, drawn back on our commitment to our 0.7 aid budget. They have now said it's going to be 0.5. It's not in statute, it's not in law, but they have control of that budget. The reason they're doing that is because they want to take a chunk of that money and use it elsewhere, which shows that they haven't got the respect and regard they should have for the global south and how important that budget is and how it helps people. We are not linking up politically with the global south. We're not allowing their activists to talk to us so that we understand what's happening to them. We only see when there's a humanitarian crisis. How do we respond to that? And that's fantastic. I'm not saying we shouldn't respond to humanitarian crisis, but we should be continually having a conversation so we know where the shocks to the system are, so that we're able to help and support and educate ourselves. That, for instance, there are fishermen or fisherwomen, in Philippines that need our support. There may be, a bushfire which goes on for days and days and days, and people say, well, when did that start? There might be signs that are coming up. How do we have those conversations? And we, at every single level, we can be connecting. So parliamentarian to parliamentarian, activist to activist, the faith groups as well. There's lots of different, stakeholders that need to come together to make sure that the global south are not left behind, because they are being left behind. And we even see that with who becomes the most prominent activist on climate change, which is wrong. It's not because I'm not criticizing Greta, but what I am saying is that the media, they do swarm around not the global south activists. They will more go to the north, should we say. And really, it should be fair. It should be equal. Everyone's voices should be heard. And the more we do that, the better,
I agree about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what are your main priorities for tackling climate change in Edmonton? Well,
one of my priorities is first and foremost, is to always listen to my constituents. And I speak up on local issues. So I've had a lot of people speak to me about the incinerator in Edmonton, the expansion of it. And it has caused a lot of upset for local people who are worried about the impact it's going to have on their health. And I've laid that down and I've made sure their voices were heard. Also, just the local environment itself, around the way people are recycling, the way people are dumping things, and just connecting that with the way that we're living. Unfortunately, a lot of people are living closely and they don't have the space to recycle. They're living in homes which possibly they are renting. They don't have the luxury of planning how they can recycle, because really all they have is a room, or they're sharing, the bathroom, or, they don't have those options. So one of my biggest issues is looking at housing and how it affects the local people, because that does impact on our climate as well. And I'm talking about the local climate. So personally, what I'm trying to do is speak up, and I just keep trying to learn. I'm not an expert, but I just respond to what people ask me to respond to. For instance, being on this webinar, Francis has asked me to come along. I'm here to learn, to speak to you guys, and for you guys to learn from me, so you're aware of the things I'm interested in as well. So Kate has spoken about that issue to me. I can write to Kate about something which I've learned, and maybe that will help her in her job, because I really want us to continue this conversation afterwards,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you. I completely agree. When you educate yourself, then you can kind of educate yourself a little bit more. You can also educate everyone around you. And yeah, I definitely think that's the answer.
Definitely.
Thank you. I really like what you said about continuing the conversation after. I think it is important to learn from each other, like you and Monica have said. And so just leading on from that, the Edmonton incinerator, they plan to expand their site in 2017. And the incinerator already produces emissions above the legal limits, as well as like discouraging people from recycling and investment in recycling and other sustainable options. I just wondered who approved the Edmonton incinerator expansion?
So the actual board is made up of 7 local authorities. So Enfield is one of them, but there are other board members that are on there, and they come together and they make the decision. The issue, I suppose, for Edmonton is that the incinerator is actually in the constituency. So people that live nearby, or as you said, Olivia, you can see it from where your home is. For those people, it is very, very muddled because it's in your area, but actually the decision was made by other neighbouring local authorities. So there is a board, and that board has representatives from every local authority. There's 7 of them, as I said, and they made that decision. Yeah. So what I could do as the local MP was to lay the objections which had come to me from local people, and to make sure that their voices were heard.
Thank you for that. I think it was kind of confusing to understand who actually approved it, and it was difficult to find out whether the North London Waste Authority was actually a company or a local council authority, but thank you for clearing that up.
Okay, so a follow-up question to that is, so the North London Waste Authority are responsible for the expansion of the incinerator, and how can a company have more power over the incinerator plans than an elected leader such as yourself?
Well, one of the things about being an elected representative to Parliament means that I can speak to the council, but I'm not elected onto the council. So what my job is to speak up for the residents who voted me in to go to Parliament. But the issue around the incinerator and the decisions which were made, they were made up, like I say, by the 7 local authorities. The ins and outs of how it was set up, I don't know, because when I became, the MP, I've come in to find it as it is. But I do know that there's representatives from all of the 7 local authorities. But they are an entity on their own, which anyone can write to, and they will explain, who they are and, the foundations of what they are. So that information is not hidden. So it's just that it's a bit confusing, as Olivia said, because it's in Edmonton. So you think, well, the council must have something to do with this. Then there's other councils that have got something to do with it as well, because of the way it's used, you see. So it's used by all of the local authorities.
Okay, that's cleared up. Thank you.
So what can individuals do to stop the construction of the expansion of the incinerator? Because I know you said you could send them a letter and they can kind of talk through it, but is there anything you can actually do to stop the expansion of the incinerator?
Well, as I said, what I've done is I've done what I can do in my position. So my position is that I can, lay a deputation, which I've done. So I spoke to the board and I explained how I felt. I've contributed to a debate which was in the House of Commons before COVID in those days. But for yourselves as activists, your response would be different to mine, because you don't have to write to anyone, you don't have to do a deputation, So what I would say to you is to find out who is campaigning around this issue and how can you join up with those people to have a wider voice on incinerators themselves. And
okay.
So I would direct you in that, in that direction. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much.
So my question is that the recycling rates of the North London Waste Authority are at 30% with the incinerator there. And the North London Waste Authority is estimated to spend an additional £1 billion on the expansion of the incinerator. Do you think that this money could be used for more sustainable alternatives?
Well, I think one of the things for you to find out is the money, where does the money come from? So if the money is maybe I mean, I don't know, but I'm just saying it's for you to find that out, and then you will know why it can only be spent on the incinerator. So if it's money that is from a private investor, then, you know, you can't really say where can they're up to them where they spend their money. But if you're asking, is it council money, then your question would be more responsive. I could respond to that. Oh, if it was from the council, as in Enfield Council, isn't there other things in the council, you know, that money could be spent on? But I don't know where that money's coming from. So that's a question to be asked, really. And then you'd know why it's been invested in that way, if that makes sense.
The money is actually coming from, some of it's coming from an investor, and some of it's actually coming from the council as well.
Oh, I see. So it's a mixture. Yeah, and as I said, Olivia, because there's 7 councils coming together, the decision is much bigger than just Enfield, and that's why it's harder to kind of unravel, because there are 7 different local authorities coming together. But then again, that's a relationship which has already been inherited and which I've walked into. So I'm finding this out with you guys, you know. So it's the way it's been set up.
Okay, my next question is, Tottenham is one of the poorest areas in London with a 65% Black and ethnic minority population. Do you think that this is a coincidence that the hazardous incinerator has been placed in one of London's most deprived areas, as opposed to a more affluent and white areas such as Winchmore Hill in the same borough?
Well, the problem is that the stats are against people that live in much more deprived areas. That isn't, that's not hidden information, that's fact. You know, within the borough itself, people that live in Edmonton, as opposed to those that live in, say, Southgate or Palmer's Green, there is, you know, a difference between 10 years lifespan. So this is fact. So when the question that you've asked, Anna, is a key question, because if everybody knows that people live less, don't live as long in deprived areas, then why would an incinerator be put in a place where there's a possibility of people, you know, contracting, you know, respiratory problems? So that was what I said in my deputation, was that people have a least likely kind of, what's the word? You know, their lifespan is worse in the areas like Edmonton. So why would you put that there and not think about their health? That's what I said when I did my deputation. I made that very clear. These are the most vulnerable. You know, we've had COVID, we're still going through it. We've seen the stats, people, you know, Black, Asian minority communities, they're more likely to die of COVID. So I'm not coming from an emotional woe with me position. I'm coming from a place where it's more likely that people that live in these areas have already got health issues. A lot of people had health issues they didn't know about until COVID came along. And it was like, I didn't know I had this problem, and they've lost their lives. We've seen bus drivers, you know, that in the main are, you know, young Black men losing their lives. So, you know, because of COVID. So I think we need to really talk about these things and educate people so people understand that there already is this health inequality. There already are people who are less likely to have a flourishable, lovely life. So why would we then have an incinerator in those areas? That's my concern. Where the money comes from, you know, who's extended it, you know, that for me, I'm not saying that's not important, because the questions you asked, Olivia, are important. What I'm worried about is that why are we allowing an incinerator to be in an area where the life expectancy is less, where more people have respiratory problems, where more people are less likely to have the agency to stand up for themselves, because they have all of these other issues they're dealing with, not because they can't speak up for themselves, but because they're already struggling with life. So my job as the local MP is to stand up for those people, to say, look, please consider these things, consider people's lives before we start, you know, compounding more things on top of them, which will make it harder for them to have a flourishable life. And that's where I'm coming from. You know, of course we can look into the detail and where's the money coming, and it should be invested somewhere else. But as you said, Anna, you know, look at the people that live in these areas. Why is it then an incinerator has been put there? That's the question for me. And it's just not fair. That's how I look at it. You know, and that was where I was coming from, you know, when I did my deputation. It was the social justice of it, or the lack of social justice.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important that people should be educated about this, because not until I did my research, I knew that there's actually like a wide lifespan of like different areas in the same borough. So I think it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's only 10 years until the impacts of climate change are irreversible. Labour may not be in power for 4 years, and even then they may not win. So what are you doing now to tackle climate change?
Well, what we need to do now is to keep, at every given opportunity, we need to keep backing the Green Deal for jobs. And when I say that, like I said earlier, talking about Brexit, when there's open opportunities, we step in there, and our debate across the chamber has to be about, this is an alternative. We have to keep giving alternatives. And as you know, you're right, Monica, we've got a long way to go. Who knows what could happen? But we don't wait for that. We look at the opportunities as they arise. So, you know, we've got the private members bill, as I said, coming from, you know, Caroline Lucas on this issue. We are together on that. You know, yes, she's Green and, you know, we're Labour. But when it comes to tackling climate change, she's got the stripes, she's done the work, she's known for it. So we support her when it comes, and we salute her on work like this, because she's coming from the right place. You know, we also need to look at our local areas. When I say local, look at Manchester, look at Liverpool, where we have mayors. We actually have Labour mayors, so we can influence their work and say, okay, what's your manifesto look like? For instance, with Andy Burnham in Manchester, we've got Steve Rotherham in Liverpool. You know, we've got, even in London, we've got the Hackney mayor, you know, who's elected. In Lewisham, we have an elected mayor. Newham, we have an elected mayor. So we do have opportunities. Bristol as well, you know, we have Marvin Reeves. So we have opportunities where we can engage with Labour leadership, and we need to give them the opportunity to say, look, this is what it would look like if Labour was in power. Can you take a piece of this and develop it into your own strategy? Because then when it comes to an election, they can run their own election on the Green Deal, and people can say, okay, so this is what it looks like if I live in Bristol. This is what it looks like if I live in Lewisham. This is because... And then they will make it, it will click in their head, and they'll be like, okay, that's what it will look like if Labour was in power, full stop. So we have little pockets of opportunity. It's not all over, but we need to use them and make sure that we give the platforms that we have the right opportunity to really invest and show people this is what it would look like if Labour was in power.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. Thank you.
We sort of come to the end of the half hour.
Oh, okay.
I bet you had other questions as well, didn't you? You didn't? Oh, well, that's good.
No, that was the last one, actually.
That was the last one.
Yeah, that was perfect timing, and that's great. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, all of you. I mean, thanks, Kate, for doing this. As you said, you were the guinea pig. You were the first one, and you did it very well. So thank you for doing it, because that helps a lot. And thank you, the three of you. I think your research was incredible, and I can learn from you on that. You really got your questions together there, and that was amazing. So that was a really, really good event, and I'm really pleased we did it. So, you know, thank you for doing that. And Kate, thank you for joining us and taking part.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Monica. I really appreciated your questions. Hopefully I was able to answer them for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your questions. And, you know, there's so much work we can do. And I appreciate all the questions that you asked on Edmonton as well. It's something which does come up a lot, especially around the incinerator. But I think just, you know, generally the level of questioning was really good and made me think about things, especially the last question, Monica. I had to think on my feet, and I was like, actually, we have got some opportunities, but it's about keeping the conversation going. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and so if you've achieved the you know, the thing of making a politician think on their feet, you've done a good job. So that's been really great. Okay, so thank you all again. It's been a great interview, and we'll end this interview now.